subhanallah, after some time, they found some more of those type of writings. When they brought them out, and now, as they find more and more that was coming out, they found, they came to, they went through some of these that had an explanation of every letter. What does a letter means? How to translate the letter into any other language, into understanding it. Because those were pictures, generally. Just like some of the Chinese words are nowadays. So those were pictures in those days. So when they learned how to translate them, now they go back to some of the old writings they found and they put them in the museum, and they find that it's a story about Fir'aun. From those days, a story about Fir'aun, and it has the name of Haman in it. So, subhanallah, everything is being confirmed. Same way, in the story of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wassalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that Musa alayhi salatu wassalam had to deal with Fir'aun. Where was Musa alayhi salam? In Egypt. So he was dealing with the king of Egypt, who was called Fir'aun. Now, it also says in Qur'an that Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam was in Egypt, and he dealt with the king of his time. What was his name? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say that Yusuf alayhi salam had to deal with Fir'aun. Fir'aun, of course, is not a name of a person; it's a title of the rulers of Egypt. But when in the story of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Malik, king. And historians already have gone through this, not in the light of Qur'an and hadith. This is non-Muslim historians, when they divided the different periods of the history of Egypt, they say there was a period of Egypt when there was a kingdom over there, and there was a history of period in Egypt when the people that were ruling, they were considering themselves to be the Lord, and they were called Fir'auns. So these are two different periods of the history. So Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam is in the period where he is dealing with king. He is during the time of the kingdom. And Musa alayhi salam is during the time of Fara'ina, when Fir'aun, when people who claim to be the Lord billah, are there. And Qur'an distinguishes it in words that no one really paid attention to it. Generally, no one paid attention to this, that why in the story of Musa alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not coincident, never used the word king for Fir'aun. In the story of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, never used the word Fir'aun for the king. Always used the word king for him. And then history tells us, no, these were two different periods of history in the history of Egypt and Yusuf alayhi salam. And according to the historians also, they prove that Yusuf alayhi salam's period was the period of the kingdom. And Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu salam's period was the period of when Fir'auns were there. So amazing things that we find in the in Qur'an al-Kareem related to the stories of the previous nations. These are only a few examples. Otherwise, there are really hundreds of examples in the light of Qur'an that where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us facts about the previous nations and places where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam never have been there. He never visited those places, and he gave us all the details of those places and what happened over there. And people after that, when they went and visited the place, they found it exactly the way it was described by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or of course we should say by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Qur'an al-Kareem. This is one way of looking at the miraculous knowledge of Qur'an. Another way is the scientific facts in Qur'an al-Kareem. And we know that that is also very deep, and there is a lot of information that came out about it very recently, about the scientific facts that are in Qur'an proving the miraculous part of Qur'an. And it's something that no one can really deny. It's so obvious, so clear, and so many examples of it are out there that no need even to go into any of these examples, because I'm sure everyone here must remember at least one or two examples of it, if not more. So it's something that it's very well known these days. But one thing that I may mention about it, that when a person, I don't remember his name, there was a scientist who became Muslim after seeing the things in the ocean. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Qur'an, about the ocean, that ظلمات بعضها فوق بعض, that كظلمات في بحر اللجي يغشاه موج من فوقه من فوقه موج من فوقه سحاب. He's giving the example of the darknesses in the depth of the ocean, that he says the darkness of kufr is just like the darkness of the ocean. And then he says that the darkness of ocean is such that there is a wave, above that there is another wave, and above that is a cloud. When there is cloud, then it gets very dark underneath. So when this person is doing the research and he's in the water, and this is his field that he works in. So he's a scientist and he works in the oceans and the water. And as soon as he looked at this ayah of Qur'an al-Kareem, right away he recited the Shahada, saying that I know that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam never had the opportunity of being in the ocean. And if a person just goes to the ocean and travels on the ocean, would not know these details that Qur'an is mentioning it so specifically. And he says, I know what this ayah says in Qur'an exactly, is word by word applicable to how the situation of the oceans are. That is not just one wave. There are waves above waves. And then if the cloud is on top, it gets very dark underneath. ظُلُمَاتٌ بَعْضُهَا فَوْقَ بَعْضٍ. Darkness is upon one above another. So, this is another way of looking at the miraculous part of the Qur'an. Then, another way of looking at the miraculous part of Qur'an, how Qur'an has been preserved for all of these years without any changes to it. Without any single change to this book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's been preserved word by word. There isn't any book in the world where people could really prove the authenticity of that book, saying that it has been preserved word by word, and no changes have been done to it. This is only for Qur'an, and this is only the miracle of Qur'an, that everything is preserved. And subhanallah, up to this day, remember, Qur'an speaks about the previous books at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The time different period, the difference between the time of Isa alayhi salam and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is about 600 years. Qur'an says, يُحَرِّفُونَ الْكَلِمِ. At that time, Qur'an mentioned that these people have started changing their books. Within 600 years, the books were changed. Imagine, Qur'an is being there for 1400 years, more than 1400 years, and still is being preserved word by word, just the way it was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if a person would like to try it, bring a person from different countries of the world. Bring people from small villages of the world. People who don't have access to internet, to anything else, to any of the technology, and bring a child who have memorized Quran from there, and bring people from anywhere in the world, let them sit together and recite Quran. They all will be reciting the exact same words of the Quran. In Salat al-Taraweeh, bring one person who would from one country, and then let all the Huffaz from the world stand behind him. They would be only correcting the mistakes, which will be commonly known that it's a mistake. It's not that, no, this is how we read it in our country. There is nothing like this. So, this is the miraculous part of Quran. So there are many different ways of looking at the miracles of Quran. Although, when we are counting the 1200 miracles of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we are counting Quran as just one of those miracles. So, this is one miracle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Al-Qur'an al-Kareem. Talking about the miracles in the light of a hadith. One of the well-known miracle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is when, through the barakah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a miracle that took place that was a universal miracle, a miracle that was not limited to people around him or things around him. It was a miracle that anyone in the world could have seen it at that time, and that was splitting the moon into two. And we talked about that in the previous session. This is well known because there is mention of it in Quran, وَانْشَقَّ الْقَمَرِ اقْتَرَبَتِ السَّاعَةُ وَانْشَقَّ الْقَمَرِ, that day of judgment have drawn very near, and the moon has split into two. But there is another miracle very similar to this, which is narrated in At-Tabrani and in Majma' al-Zawaid. it says that this hadith is Hasan, which means authentic hadith. That once, Jabir radiallahu anhu narrates that once Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam ordered the sun to stop the movement because he did not want it to set at that time, and the sun stopped, and everyone saw that the movement of the sun had stopped, is not continuing anymore. In another hadith, which is in Al-Bayhaqi, it goes even in further detail, saying that after the incident of Isra and Mi'raj, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam informed them about one of the trade caravans that was out of Makkah, of Quraysh, that was supposed to arrive Makkah. And they asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that if you really travel through the same route, then you should know where those people are. He said, yes, they should enter Makkah in 3 days. Now, when you're saying the situation they would enter Makkah in 3 days, doesn't mean exactly 3 days. But now, these people started making, on the 3rd day, they started making fun of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that, look, the sun is about to set of the 3rd day, and there is nothing, those people are not here yet. At that time, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the movement of the sun stopped until those people came and entered Makkah Mukarramah. And then only the sun continued the movement and went and set. Another miracle regarding the rain and making dua that through which people had rain right away. Hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sunan ibn Majah. Anas radiallahu anhu says, it was the day of Jum'ah. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was giving the khutbah and a person came in. He said, Ya Rasulullah, all the lands are too dry, animals are dying, and our farms are totally dry. There is no growth over there. Make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, right away, he raised his hands and started making the dua. And before people left the masjid, it was raining and it was pouring out there, and people had to run out of the masjid in order to get home quickly. Next Jum'ah, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam giving khutbah, and still, from that Jum'ah till the Jum'ah, still is raining. And the same man comes in, he says, Ya Rasulullah, don't you look at the situation, there is water everywhere, now it's getting flooded, make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to stop it. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam pointed his finger towards the skies and he said, Allahumma hawalayna wa la alayna. Ya Allah, keep it around us, not on us. And Anas radiallahu anhu says, as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was pointing towards the sky and is moving his finger, it was as if he's cutting the cloud with his finger. And the cloud is just getting cut. And it became a round circle where there is no cloud, and all around it is all cloud, and it's raining outside of Medina. Imam ibn Khuzaymah, ibn Hibban, and Mustadrak, Imam Hakim rahmatullahi alayhi have narrated in Mustadrak on the authority of Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhu. He says, when we went for the battle of Tabuk, on the way we ended up at a place that was totally dry, and there were nothing around it. No one lives around that area, and there was no well around that area at all. So people started slaughtering their camels, because camel stores water. It has a storage. So people started slaughtering their camels. When Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu saw the situation, and he realized that if people will kill their camels, of course they have to save their lives, so they can kill the camel for that. But then you will be going through a lot of hardship, because you don't have a ride anymore. And it's a long journey, going there and then coming back. So right away Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu went to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and said, Ya Rasulullah, Inna Allah qad awwadaka fi du'ai khayra. Ya Rasulullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always gives you good from the dua that you make. So why don't you, Ya Rasulullah, please make dua that Allah will provide us with some water? So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam asked Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Abu Bakr, would you like to see that? Would you like me to really do it? He said, yes, please, Ya Rasulullah. Right away, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam raised his hands and started making dua. And he says in the hadith, there was no cloud, it was all dry, and as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam making the dua, it started raining. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu says that I knew this rain came through the dua of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So as people are taking the water I took few people with me and we went around to see how far it's raining, and it was just raining on us. There was no rain out of that circle. It was just raining on us. Wherever we were, it was raining there. And outside of that, there was no rain. All of these are very clear signs of the prophethood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that people are seeing it. People are seeing it with their own eyes, that subhanallah, he makes dua and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts the dua right away and gives him whatever he is asking for. Then, more than this is of course rain coming from the cloud. More than this are those hadiths that talk about water gushing between Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's fingers. And Imam Qurtubi rahmatullahi alayhi says that those hadiths are mutawatir, which means there is so many hadiths narrated regarding this that there is no way a person can ever deny them. Large number of people always have narrated these hadiths, and this incident did not happen once or twice in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It happened a lot of times during the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that whenever they needed a water, he would put his hand in a pot or somewhere, and water would start gushing from between the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Also, muhaddithin have mentioned one more thing about this. They said that this miracle was specifically only for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not mentioned anywhere that anyone else was able to perform similar type of miracle. When during the time of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, Bani Israel needed water, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him to hit with a stick on the rock, and water started gushing out of the rock. Of course, it was a miracle of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, but generally water comes out of rock. So it was a miracle that he hit the stick and then water starts coming out. But this is something very unique, that water will start gushing from between the fingers of a person. And that was the greatest water people have ever seen. This is why in some of the narrations say that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu says, in one of these situations, I was the person who brought little water to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he puts his hand and then water started gushing between his fingers. And he said, call everyone to come and make wudu and use the water as they wish. So people started coming. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu said that people started making wudu out of it, and I continuously kept on drinking as much as I could, and I would stop, then I would try to drink even more, and I just, throughout the time as the water was there and was being used, I was trying to drink as much as I could, because that was the most blessed water in the world. And this happened a lot of time. In one of the situations is during the time of Hudaybiyah, when Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in totally ran out of water. There was no water at all. And Anas radiallahu anhu says, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam asked, is there any water at all? Anyone has little water? So he said, finally we found a container in which there were few drops of water. So we brought that to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He started making dua on the container, and then as he turned it over, so little water came. Initially there were only few drops. Now there is more water that comes, that spill out. He says, before it was just enough that if you turn it over, it will just dry by the time it comes out. This is how much it was in it. So now he puts it out in a pot, and there is water in it. Then he puts his hand in it, and he starts making dua. And Anas radiallahu anhu says, water started gushing from between the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Someone asked him, how many people used that water? Anas radiallahu anhu says, we were 1,400 people. We used that water that came from between the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And not only that, we were drinking it ourselves. We drank that water. We used it for wudu. Some people needed to take shower. They took shower. And then we started, because our animals needed water too. So we gave it to our animals also for drinking. And it was enough for all the people, for everyone. So in another hadith, Anas radiallahu anhu says, I was sure that even if we were 100,000 of us, it would be enough for us, because it was just barakah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that water. And there is another well-known hadith which is also in the Sahih, in Bukhari and Muslim, when Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in were out with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and they ran out of water. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to Ali radiallahu anhu that take a person with you, and he gave him a direction to a place, that go to such and such place. Over there you would find a woman, old woman, with 2 containers of water. Bring her to me. They went, they brought that woman to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam started making some dua, and then he opened the cover of the container and he blew into it. After making dua, he blew into those containers, and now he closed it and he opened the faucets from the bottom. And he said to Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in, use, whoever wants to use any water, go ahead and use it. And they kept on coming and using it, and everyone is trying to use as much as he could because he knows this is the barakah from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At the end, when everyone was done, and they have been announcing it over and over, anyone needs more water, anyone needs any more water, no one needs more. We filled our containers, we gave it to our animals, we drank as much as we could, and we filled our pots, and we made wudu, we took shower, we did everything we could, we were able to do with this water. No more, no one can use it anymore. Imagine how much water must have been used, that if everyone is being asked, you can make any use of it, and so, no, I made every use of it. There is nothing more I can do. So at the end, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he closed the faucet of these two containers, and they looked into it, the water, there was more water in the container now than it was before when she came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in that collect something gift for her. So the Sahaba started bringing, someone will bring some food, some little clothing, whatever. They put everything together and they loaded all of that on her camel, and they told her, now you can go home. So after that she went home and she informed her people the miracle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, through which later on, not that right away, but later on, that whole clan became Muslim.